know, and it's also very good to just be able to be warm-hearted about people that I don't know, or people whose names I see but not the faces. Anyway, Jeannie wants to begin with some protocol announcements of hers, so let's hear from Jeannie.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, good afternoon for everyone. Thank you for your presence in this webinar hosted by the Urantia Association's Education Committee. Today, as you know, we have the participation of Jeffrey Wattles, who will present a webinar titled, "How Does the New Philosophy of Living Help Us Grow?" During the meeting, we ask you, please mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid disturbing background noises. If you want to speak, please raise your hand and unmute yourself. Please do not use the chat function until you are invited to do so. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, you may chat privately with me. Use headphones if you can to improve sound quality and to reduce echo background noises when speaking. We ask you please do not type when your microphone is not muted. The session will be recorded for future study purpose use. The videos will be made available to the public in the Urantia Association YouTube channel. Turn off your camera if you do not like your image being used for records, and ask to speak off the record at any time when you do not want your say to be part of the videotape. In this way, your part will be cut out of the video during editing. Thank you, Jeff, for your willingness to serve. The session is yours now. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Jeannie. I'm very grateful for your teamwork in this venture, and we'll have some silent time and communion time, but I would like to introduce that communion time by introducing the share screen function and showing you a little outline of what's to come for this this session. We've got this outline for our work together, and you will observe that we culminate our 2 hours together with a thought, a worshipful thought that you can read in bold at the bottom of the screen that you're looking at now. Where we are going, where we are headed in this 2 hours together is toward grateful worship of the Universal Father, whose indwelling presence is the guarantee that all our true growth projects will succeed through our sincere, persistent, and wholehearted cooperation in grace. Now that's where we're headed, and our communion time in a couple of minutes will anticipate that. But the segments of the 2 hour session you see outlined here. First of all, why care about growth in truth, beauty, and goodness? I've got a few quotes that I want to share with you relevant to that. They're very brief. They're for contemplation, not for jumping in discussion. And then we'll raise the question, how does project-centered experiential education promote growth? And I've got, again, a quote on that. And then I will let you look at one another again as I give you a little bit of discourse having to do with how to discern your project. The goal of today's workshop is that each person has a sharper idea or a fresh idea, if didn't have one before, about your project or cluster of projects that you may be working on. And then after I finish that discourse, we have a chance to ask questions about the project. I'm asking you not to use the chat function unless I invite you to do so. And asking questions, you can do that via the chat, or if we see hands, I'll respond to the ones that I can see or Jeannie helps me observe. And then we face the question, what project is calling to me at this stage in my life? Then we draft a brief project statement or thought. And if you would like, you can share your project in chat, but wait to respond to other people's project until the time for general discussion. Now that will take, I think, a little less than half of the first hour, the whole of the first hour. And then we'll go into the discussion of how the emerging new philosophy of living helps us grow. And after that, I will talk about that topic for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A and times for open chat and how to make use of this new philosophy in the projects that we will be germinating here. And then we'll come back to this communion thought. And I want to begin our communion prayerfully, gratefully, joyously, as we anticipate. On the one hand, I am your teacher, your leader, your facilitator for this workshop, but in a greater sense, we look to Jesus and to his spirit of truth. We rely on the Father's indwelling presence, on Mother's adjutant mind spirits, and more. We look forward to whatever blessings may be coming today in the course of our experimental attempt during these 2 hours to cooperate with Divine Spirit as we nurture our growth, thinking about projects and thinking about the new philosophy of living. So let's take a couple of minutes to be silent now before we start our next phase. Eternal Mother, Son, we are so grateful for your mercy that you have in ways beyond our understanding. All that is required for that forgiving tolerance of our imperfections and our mediocrity. We can come to you in prayer at any time. We can enjoy your companionship and your spirit of bestowal manifest in our Creator Son. Thank you for your graceful presence with us as we start this project together. So here come my quotes. Why care about growth and truth, beauty, and goodness? Listen to these three, I think there are 4 quotes by now, in silent contemplation. We are not striving with the mind, but listening with the soul during this time. You can consciously augment, adjust, or harmony by 1, choosing to respond to divine leading, sincerely basing the human life on the highest consciousness of truth, beauty, and goodness, and then coordinating these qualities of divinity through wisdom, worship, faith, and love. God answers man's prayer by giving him an increased revelation of truth, an enhanced appreciation of beauty, and an augmented concept of goodness. Throughout this glorious age of light and life, the chief pursuit of the ever-advancing mortals is the quest for a better understanding and a fuller realization of the comprehensible elements of deity, truth, beauty, and goodness. This represents man's effort to discern God in mind, matter, and spirit. And as the mortal pursues this quest, he finds himself increasingly absorbed in the experiential study of philosophy, cosmology, and divinity. Said Jesus, "Let me emphatically state this eternal truth. If you, by truth coordination of science and religion, learn to exemplify in your lives this beautiful wholeness of righteousness, your fellow men will then seek after you, that they may gain what you have so acquired." Next, how shall we pursue growth? What are we going to do? How are we going to go about it? Here's a quote that pertains to that question. This is the keynote of the whole Nebadon educational system, character acquired by enlightened experience. The teachers provide the enlightenment, the universe station, and the ascender's status afford the opportunity for experience. And the wise utilization of these two augments character. Now, consider the projects that we take up in the mansion worlds, some that Jesus gave, and others. Very good to see some evidence of more people joining. Thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to do a bit of a discourse to share with you the kinds of growth projects that we undertake as we go forward in the universe. The idea is that we will be inspired by a little phrase here or there, perhaps, to realize what might be the project that is calling us today or at this phase of our life. I read from paper 47. Almost the entire experience of Mansion World number 1 pertains to deficiency ministry. Survivors arriving on this first of the detention spheres present so many and such varied defects of creature character and deficiencies of mortal experience that the major activities of the realm are occupied with the correction and cure of these manifold legacies of the life in the flesh. Biological deficiencies were largely made up on the first mansion world. Their defects in planetary experience pertaining to sex life, family association, and parental function were either corrected or projected for future rectification. Mansonia number 2 more specifically provides for the removal of all phases of intellectual conflict and for the cure of all varieties of mental disharmony. The effort to master the significance of Urantia Mota begun on the first mansion world is here more earnestly continued. Mansonia III is a world of great personal and social achievement for all who have not made the equivalent of these circles of culture prior to release from the flesh on the mortal nativity worlds. On this sphere, more positive educational work is begun. The chief purpose of this training is to enhance the understanding of the correlation of Urantia Mota and mortal logic, the coordination of Urantia Mota and human philosophy. Surviving mortals now gain practical insight into true metaphysics. This is the real introduction to the intelligent comprehension of cosmic meanings and universe relationships. Now, the game here is not to let all the inputs overwhelm. And I'm thinking right now of this marvelous boat that Jesus made that was dug up in the Sea of Galilee and reconstructed to some extent and put on display in Kibbutz Ginosar. You can visit it today. It's called A Boat of Many Woods. You can see the outline of the boat there. Let me put on a little bit more light, see if I can illuminate that a little bit better for you. Up here you can see the outline of the boat, and the woods are sort of symbolized by color. There are a dozen woods of different sort that Jesus wove into the creation of this boat. And for the moment, you're going to be seeing a boat with a dozen woods, so to speak. But remember the simplicity of the function of the boat. The boat operates as a unity, and the way of simplicity in love is our salvation from getting overwhelmed with the ideals of the complexity of growth. So next I'm going to shift into projects that Jesus gave to each of his 11 loyal apostles in his final admonitions and warnings. Now, I'm not going to read them to you, but I will give some observation about that. With the Urantia world, we see the importance of sequence, that the basic foundations of growth must be in place before we can flourish in the higher realms of growth. But now, my observations on Jesus' projects of growth given to his in his final admonitions and warnings are the following. Clearly, Jesus does not follow any simple formula for creating a project such as those that he gives to his apostles. Nevertheless, another approach to discerning the will of God for your growth in this stage of your life is in communion with Jesus to create a statement representing what you believe Jesus might say to you. We can ask, now these are questions that I derive from my study of this section 2 of paper 181. What is my great weakness or combination of weaknesses? What corresponding strength or combination of strengths can I achieve in God and proclaim by my life? What strength of mine is emerging that I can develop further? What have I suffered that has taught me a lesson that my life can proclaim to others? What planetary need am I especially qualified to serve? And the last, but by no means the least, the one that covers the daily aspect of our lives, the one that Jesus gave to the Alphaeus twins. How can I do the ordinary material work of life in a way that reveals divine sonship and daughterhood with God? I'm going to just share a little bit more about this matter of developing projects. What I used to do at Kent State University with the 3,000 students that I took through these projects, about 2,000 of whom made dramatic growth I asked them to relate the truth-related philosophy we were studying, or the beauty-related aesthetics, or goodness-related ethics that we were studying, to the number one front burner growth issue in their lives, and to apply the best teachings from these truth, beauty, and or goodness areas that we were working with to help them progress in these areas of life that were particularly challenging for them. And it was by tackling the front burner issue that the ones who really made major progress did succeed. Now, I'm working with a growth group right now, which is supporting very diverse projects. And partly because projects change over time, I'm here going to quote more than one project for some individuals. I've got about a dozen projects here, and then I'll mention one more thing, namely that the people are going to be asked to do these these specific projects in a way that touches somehow in each of the 7 components of the philosophy of living outlined at the end of paper 2. We'll have questions about project formation after I read this list. The projects are, for example, to improve decision-making in the light of the conditions of effective prayer. Personal strengthening relative to the demands of the current stage of one's career. Sustaining spiritual priorities as success opens new doors and the schedule becomes full. Growth in courage to speak forth in groups, not just about non-personal spirituality, but about the relationship with God. Acquire the qualities needed to be an effective gospel messenger. Respond to growth needs simply as they arise in daily life without committing to an overall project. Enhance patience, especially late in the day after the fatigue of effort has begun to set in. Joy finding, processing grief, integrating philosophical and spiritual functioning with urgent so-called lower material and social priorities. Abide in God and strengthen integrity. Live and prepare to teach the new philosophy of living in truth, beauty, and goodness. And learn to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love the neighbor in the light of lessons learned from all 6 interpretations of the Golden Rule. Now, let me remind those of you who just have come in that we're in the midst of a workshop, and we're now at the point where in this first part of our workshop, we are in project formation, project tweaking if we already have one, or just contemplating and listening and learning what we can. But are there questions at this point that you have relative to the challenge of project formation?
Yes. Charles speaking. How to avoid procrastination, which is one of the marks of the beast that the mansion worlds are designed to eradicate. I don't see any reason, though, why we shouldn't either be able to eradicate that here, or at least go far in doing so. And how was that approach?
Well, I would delight to speak to that. That is a particular project. It is a marvelous project. It's important for nearly all of us, but that question presupposes that you've already formulated a project for yourself or one component in it, and so let's just put our effort to respond to these projects off a bit as I see if there are other questions. Once we do another couple of stages of our work together, then it will be a great pleasure to respond to that one specifically. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, what I'm going to do is go on to the next stage right now and encourage you to, I'm going to share my screen again. What project of growth is yours to work on now? Take a few minutes to enter into communion, to pose the question honestly, and to discern or begin to pray for your answer. Excuse me now for interrupting you, but that will be all the time we're giving right now to this phase of the work. And next, if you would like to share with anyone else, you may wish to simply state your growth goals in positive terms. For example, you don't have to say, I'm struggling to overcome lust, cowardice, and pride, but you could say, I hunger for the beautiful wholeness of righteousness, including self-mastery, courage, and the humility of divine sonship with God and self-forgetting service to humankind. Then, if you would like to share it with one or more persons or with the whole group, use the chat function to do so. If you want advice, say so. Since we will not have time to interact much, if you want to invite email from anyone in the group, include your email address to the persons whom you address or to the group. And then as we share what we have to share on the chat, and we start to read what is being shared in the chat, we will prayerfully, meditatively, worshipfully read what is shared. We may wish to make notes now on the projects that have been shared, for example, project to overcome procrastination or others, but we'll wait to respond to other people's projects until the time comes later for general discussion. So I'm going to stop my share. The chat is open, and I am looking forward to seeing whatever comes up.
Jeff, since I'm on the phone, I'm not quite sure what the protocol is for me in this process.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning that problem. I'll read off what I see thus far, and we have a small group, so we may not see very much. From Pete, I am balancing the art of patience with love and understanding. Pete Walker. From Michael Hill, I am earnestly working to live the example of acceptance that Jesus showed forth as he worked with the apostles, as I move through my daily life. From Jeannie Vasquez, I am working to grow in understanding and living the divine love in my service and daily life. From Evie Pineda, hello group, blessings. I am growing now for some years into integrity in every situation in my life. I want to grow in wisdom and love for all those who will be part of my mission during this lifetime. I want to follow Jesus in every way already in this reality. Integrity for me is the manifestation of divine love and service.
Well, I can add mine to that. I'm 75 years old now, but since I was a teenager, I committed my life to the search for truth. That's how I understood it then and still do. And a central element for me in the art of living is to refine that search and share its fruits to others in a myriad of ways and a variety of roles based on needs and wants, particularly by other people, more so for others than myself. But the paradox is, I gain from that. I've discovered experientially by putting myself aside for God's purpose and God's love, I automatically take a center stage position. It's an interesting paradox. First is last and the last is first. I think that's what it means.
Thank you very much, Charles. Well, I will call this segment of our webinar to a close and proceed into the next. I think I can do this efficiently. I'll do my best to do it efficiently. But now I am going to introduce to you the philosophy of living, and the invitation to you is draw on this as best you can. As you respond to one another after that, we'll have general discussion. If you would like to reply to other persons' projects and growth needs as expressed thus far, we can do that through chat and general conversation after the next element. So I'm going to be sharing my screen again now and entering into a discourse for 10-15 minutes, and then we'll have general discussion until it's time to close. So here we go. Okay, here's the project description for the new philosophy of living as it is stated at the end of part 2, paper 2 of the Urantia book. The great mistake of Hebrew religion was its failure to associate the goodness of God with the factual truths of science and the appealing beauty of art. As civilization progressed, and since religion continued to pursue the same unwise course of overemphasizing the goodness of God to the relative exclusion of truth and neglect of beauty, there developed an increasing tendency for certain types of men to turn away from the abstract and dissociated concept of isolated goodness. The overstressed and isolated morality of modern religion, which fails to hold the devotion and loyalty of many 20th century men, would rehabilitate itself if, in addition to its moral mandates, it would give equal consideration to the truths of science, philosophy, and spiritual experience, and to the beauties of the physical creation, the charm of intellectual art, and the grandeur of genuine character achievement. The religious challenge of this age is to those far-seeing and forward-looking men and women of spiritual insight who will dare to construct a new and appealing philosophy of living out of the enlarged and exquisitely integrated modern concepts of cosmic truth, universe beauty, and divine goodness. Such a new and righteous vision of morality will attract all that is good in the mind of man and challenge that which is best in the human soul. Truth, beauty, and goodness are divine realities, and as man ascends the scale of spiritual living, these supreme qualities of the eternal become increasingly coordinated and unified in God, who is love. All truth, material, philosophic, or spiritual, is both beautiful and good. All real beauty, material art, or spiritual symmetry is both true and good. All genuine goodness, whether personal morality, social equity, or divine ministry, is equally true and beautiful. Health, sanity, and happiness are integrations of truth, beauty, and goodness as they are blended in human experience. Such levels of efficient living come about through the unification of energy systems, idea systems, and spirit systems. Truth is coherent, beauty attractive, goodness stabilizing. And when these values of that which is real are coordinated in personality experience, the result is a high order of love, conditioned by wisdom and qualified by loyalty. The real purpose of all universe education is to effect the better coordination of the isolated child of the worlds with the larger realities of his expanding experience. Reality is finite on the human level, infinite and eternal on the higher and divine levels. All right, that's a lot. And once again, the game is to enjoy the cascading of these thoughts in our soul, rather than tense ourselves and make us uptight and nervous and anxious and frustrated by the mind striving to grasp more than we can grasp in this brief workshop. Now, how can we apply the new philosophy of living to our growth projects? Now, there's a question for you. First suggestion: the pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness prepares us for the schools of thinking, feeling, and doing in the mansion worlds. Now, truth, beauty, and goodness are blended. Thinking, feeling, and doing are blended. But for starters, I wish to correlate thinking with truth, feeling, especially joy in its various modulations, with beauty, and goodness with doing. So now I'm going to try to give voice to this philosophy of living that we've just had stated for us in its condensed form. We're interested in living the truth, in walking in beauty, and participating in divine goodness. So let's start with living the truth. What can this mean? In the initial opening set of quotes that I gave, we had that one from Jesus about truth coordinated living, and that involves science and spirituality, the truths of science and the truths of spiritual experience. If we can integrate those in our lives, then we will gain the beautiful, notice the beauty dimension comes in, wholeness of righteousness. There's the goodness dimension. So if you get truth right, beauty and goodness are there. And Jesus doesn't even mention philosophy in this context. Philosophy is the and, it's the link, it's the coordination of science and spirituality. But he doesn't make it explicit at that point. So, learning to live the truths of science is particularly important. When I think about living the truths of science, I'm thinking about the cosmic mind. And I'm thinking about that section that describes cosmic mind in paper 16, section 6, page 192, where we read about causation, duty, and worship. And causation is described in, if I can find it, where is my sheet? In the following words: the reality domain of the physical senses, the scientific realms of logical uniformity, the differentiation of the factual and the non-factual, reflective conclusions based on cosmic response. This is the mathematical form of the cosmic discrimination. And the cosmic mind comes to us through the creative Mother Spirit and her mind spirits, the adjutants that help us with our mind. And roughly speaking, that highest aspect of cosmic mind is worship. And so that relates with the adjutant of worship, the mind spirit, the spirit of worship. And the philosophical one related to duty, well, that would be most obviously represented among the adjutants by the spirit of wisdom. So, big hint for the creatures beginning in this evolutionary animal origin life. We've got the first 5 adjutants to help us, and all of these adjutants in their integration enable us to function in the realm of causation effectively. I would highlight especially the spirit of knowledge. And in paper 36, section 5, page 402, the spirit of knowledge is described in the following way: the curiosity mother of adventure and discovery. The scientific spirit, the guide and faithful associate of the spirits of courage and counsel. The urge to direct the endowments of courage into useful and progressive paths of growth. Now, as I think of what it means to translate the truths of science into a philosophy of living, I remember that in paper 2, section 7, we hear about cosmic truth. Okay, we participate in cosmic evolution. And our philosophy of living in this realm is to participate in cosmic evolution by working with the truths in different sciences. Biology, we've already heard health mentioned in the philosophy of living sketch. Health, well, that involves truths of biology. We're also involved in personal growth. Well, that involves truths of psychology. We're also attempting to make a contribution to planetary progress. So that involves truths of history, learning the lessons of history, and wrapping this all together by cosmology. And today I am especially honoring the fact that in Chicago, more precisely Techni Towers, the Urantia Book Fellowship's summer study session is devoting their entire conference to the theme of the friendly universe. And you remember that Jesus talks about the all-powerful truth of the friendly universe, which he says, I insist on believing with a wholehearted trust in spite of all appearances to the contrary. And as we learn to process our appearances to the contrary from the world around us and the world within us, and see in all these domains the friendly universe in evolution, it transforms our participation. All right, so much for the truths of science in living the truth. The truths of philosophy. In this regard, I will read the statement from page 192, duty, the reality domain of morals in the philosophic realm, the arena of reason, the recognition of relative right and wrong. This is the judicial form of the cosmic discrimination. Now, in the cosmic mind, causation, duty, worship, this is the one that bridges the other two, that unites them. A philosophical decision unites the meanings of the relevant facts of the situation that you're deciding about with the meanings of the relevant value that's the dominant value to be pursued in that situation. As you bring material fact and spiritual value together, through the philosophical understanding of meaning, you make that wise decision that enables you to go forth well. All right. That's all I'm going to say about the truths of philosophy here and now. The truths of spiritual experience. Well, what is truth? To live the truth for me means living the gospel, the many-sided gospel that Jesus taught, the many sides of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. But the amazing thing is that we can not just read that, not become enthusiastic about it only, not only create websites and videos and podcasts and so on and write books to put it out there. We can experience it. So how do we go about experiencing it? Most of the gospel phrases have to do with truth. But there's also the supreme desire. This is the discourse on sonship and citizenship, where Jesus talks about the gospel, the supreme desire to do the will of God, coupled with the supreme joy of faith's sonship with God. All right, now, those are feeling dimensions. And the beauty realm is a realm of feeling. So there's a feeling dimension in the gospel. And we know that service is an aspect of the gospel as well. So that's our goodness dimension. Gospel has all these dimensions. When we talk about walking in beauty, the beauties of the physical creation. And here I want to highlight a few things here. This is our introduction to the feeling dimension. When we emphasize nature, and more broadly, we're talking about vitality. We're talking about positive emotion. We're talking about learning to savor, not only in the present, but savor by anticipation, what we know is good that's coming. And retrospective savoring as we retain and recall and share what's been wonderful in our lives. As we learn to enjoy and to go through such suffering as is ours to go through, understanding that our body enables us to be part of nature and connect with reality on this level of causation and get started with the adventure before worship and wisdom make contact with us. To remind us to balance our lives by taking vacations and not overworking, to refresh, for example, in nature. And to appreciate the beauties of the physical creation well involves learning something about the many levels of that experience. That's all I'll say for now. The charm of intellectual art. Let's just remember this thought. The high mission of any art is to foreshadow a higher universe reality, to crystallize the emotions of time into the thought of eternity. Now, we have heard that health, sanity, and happiness are integrations of truth, beauty, and goodness as they are blended in human experience. And we know that such levels of efficient living come about through the unification of energy systems, idea systems, and spirit systems. And all that integration of levels shows up over and over again as you probe the 7 components of the new philosophy of living. Participating in divine goodness. Modern religion's moral mandates. I'm just reminding you of what we heard from the end of paper 2. morality, social equity, divine ministry. I generally emphasize in this connection putting into practice the golden rule in the light of the lessons we can learn from every single one of those 6 levels of interpretation that Jesus taught regarding the rule of living. And the grandeur of genuine character achievement. Yes, Jesus, first and foremost, but not only Jesus. There are other examples, and each of us is on the way. Each of us gets tastes of experiencing that and living that and sharing that. And those tastes become more frequent, of longer duration, and of enhanced quality as we grow in paths of truth, beauty, and goodness, and more. All right, that's all I want to say about that. And so now we've got plenty of time for general discussion. I will start out this time of sharing and inquiry by turning to the growth project that Charles put out for us initially. We'll dig into it here. How do we go about overcoming procrastination? I have 3 components of answer that I will share briefly, and then I will come back and emphasize the first one, and then I will fall silent. First and foremost, the supreme desire. When a growth challenge is facing us, nothing less than the supreme desire will be adequate to enable us to accomplish what we desire. My experience with all those students, those thousands and thousands of students that I worked with, my personal experience, and my expanded experience. Right now, I have a friend who's involved with the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm reading that big book that's titled Alcoholics Anonymous and referred to as the Big Book. And I'm seeing alcoholics as an example for us all, because we all are unable to progress in divinity without God. And we all need to mobilize the supreme devotion to our growth project that we see unfolding so remarkably in this book that I've read 122 pages in by now. Next thing I will mention is that Jesus possessed the ability effectively to mobilize all his powers of mind, soul, and body on the task immediately in hand. Doesn't mean he did this on every occasion, But if we're working on procrastination or patience or a whole host of things, we know what the task immediately in hand is. And so Jesus' technique, mobilize everything you've got. And I love the sequence here: mind, soul, and body. Mind means we mobilize our cosmic understanding, our philosophical grasp of the significance, the larger meaning of this project that is staring us in the face. Next, that expansion of meaning is the beautiful nest for the spiritual values to be right there. And so to mobilize our spiritual powers. And this includes, excuse me, I don't know the paper and section number, but in the Urantia Foundation Classical Edition, it's page 1829, where Jesus, and this comes, I think, from the teaching in Tyre and Sidon. And Jesus talks about, we're told that the apostles failed to grasp or many of them failed to grasp the necessity for using spiritual force to overcome all resistance. No, to break through all resistance and overcome every earthly obstacle to the living of the divine life, and how to appropriate from within that spiritual power, because it's there waiting for the Son of Righteousness to come and appropriate the gifts that have long been waiting for the Son's personal appropriation. So we've got to go right in there to the spirit nucleus, to the adjuster, to that superconscious realm where that power is waiting for us, and we appropriate that. Okay, so excuse me for going off on that a little bit too much. But anyway, that's the mobilizing all our powers of mind, soul, our soul powers. Could go on about that, but I won't go there at the moment. And then our powers of body, because once we get those physical energies going, you know, we're ready to begin our action. But if we have those physical energies bouncing around, it can, I mean, the sequence here is very nice, because it can jumble our clarity of mobilizing our powers of mind and soul. And that's as much as I'll say in response to Charles and overcoming procrastination. We've got the conversation started. Please continue.
I'd like to make a question, Jeff, please. You spoke about spiritual power and spiritual force, and those come from the Father. But I remember having read in the Urantia book about the spirit of truth, multiplying our spiritual force, our spiritual power, this spirit of truth. And my question is how we can acquire this spiritual power. How can we have this strength? Thank you.
Jesus says, in the gospel of the kingdom resides the mighty spirit of truth. So we find it in the gospel. We take these truths and they're living. It is so easy for a gifted and accomplished intellect to analyze and study and make the life overbalanced with study and intellectual striving. And in that excess, you know, the power gets choked off. I know what it is to be too intellectual. without the balance. I know what it is to be too spiritual without the balance. I'm going to transition a little bit now to, there's one more thing I want to say directly about your question, Jeannie. And I'm going to be speaking about power in evangelism at the moment, or power in teaching truth. Power in evangelism, we often get it very unfortunate way because we have the preacher model in our mind. And the preacher is the one who stands up in a big church, and he's at the, he's in the pulpit, he's in the center, and everybody else is quiet. They're not saying anything, and they're just listening to this guy, and he's talking, so loud and vigorous, and he's pointing his finger at them, and he's shaking. That's not the model of powerful communication. And when we think of power wrongly, we don't achieve that sincerity, that receptivity. I was starting a couple of times to use this gong before the meeting to help me calm down, because only when I'm calm can I access the true power of the Spirit. It was only a few times in his preaching that Jesus addressed the apostles with strong emotional power. So I think we have to open and let him speak to us, not activate ourselves emotionally so much, but just go into that listening, receptive mode. But the appropriation of that power, now I'm on page 1640 or something like that, the Son's appropriation of the good gifts that have been waiting. All right, what does that appropriation mean? When the gift is there, remember this thought, God answers man's prayer by giving an enhanced, expanded revelation of truth, enhanced appreciation of beauty, and augmented concept of goodness. But we don't get those one by one, separate, clear on the page. They're all blended together. If we're praying and that truth, beauty, and goodness blend manifests to us, it feels good. All we know is we've got the clarity we need. The truth, beauty, and goodness blend is sufficiently specific that it gives us the illumination. Oh, now I know the direction to go in. It feels so good. And the wonderfulness of it, various varieties of feeling good. It's not always rejoicing in the sort of boisterous sense, but that's how that's the feeling dimension. That's the beauty dimension, and the concept of goodness is there because we know the goodness of God is revealing all this to us. So as we ponder the truth that has been revealed, whether in an answer to prayer or on the page or wherever, as we ponder that truth. Okay, when we ponder, we're moving from the active mind to the soul. The soul's three powers, as described by Jesus, are the soul is the self-reflective, truth-discerning, and spirit-perceiving part of man. So that discernment of truth is a soul activity. That's what we tried to activate at the very beginning of the webinar in those first 4 quotes, to receive them with the soul, perceiving the truth there. So as we perceive the truth in the soul, then we can reach into the realm of spirit. And you talked about the universal Father and Jesus, Spirit of Truth. And regarding all such questions, at the moment, what I want to say to you is this, and I want to go to the paper on the Mother Spirit. Is that paper 34? I want to go to the section, I think it's section 6 on the Spirit and Man, or maybe it's section 7. I want to go to page 380, where the section is just beginning, and it says that all these, the thought adjuster, the Spirit of Truth, the Holy Spirit, they have different functions. The Father, the Eternal Son, and they have different functions. But in our experience, they are as one. The human mind cannot differentiate them. And we can get so wrought up intellectually trying to separate and sort out, and that intellectual effort can block the unified interaction with appropriation of spirit, where our answer lies. Okay, excuse me for giving you a long answer, but that's my answer for you.
Thank you, Jeff. Beautiful. Thank you.
I've got a couple of the chat functions here. Patience with love and understanding, acceptance that Jesus showed, living divine love in my service and daily life. A lot of those come to something that relates to what we've been talking about, and I'm going to say this, and then I want your continued comments on this. The very first quote that we started with is the one that talked about respond to the divine leading, basing the human life on the highest consciousness of truth, beauty, and goodness, and then integrating those through wisdom, worship, faith, and love. And then, now that we've had the on-ramp to high quality, mature, well-balanced love, the next phase is the recognition and loving worship of our universal Father. And the phrase after that has to do with developing, ideally for every mortal, an intelligent and wise affection for every mortal. I want to talk about that intelligent and wise affection. Sometimes I would find myself saying, I can do intelligent, I can do wise, and I can do affection. But getting them all together at the same time is quite another matter. But it seems to me that that's the goal here. And if we start with the way of simplicity, love, I mean, so much of this philosophy of living really starts to happen for us when we go from the comprehensible aspects of divinity, truth, beauty, and goodness, to the way in which divinity is coordinated in personality, love, mercy, ministry. Now, mercy is love plus scientific living. Charles Olivier talked about the delight of sharing truth in accord with the needs and wants of others. Well, the needs and wants of others, and I would add their capacity for receptivity, is what scientific living enables us to understand. So mercy is love applied. Applied to what? To the creature needs and wants and capacity of receptivity. And then what is ministry? Ministry is love and mercy applied with the righteousness that comes from our cultivation of divine goodness. So see how these all work together. But if we can just get to love or affection, what I find is that in that phrase, an intelligent and wise affection for each of your fellow mortals, if I look at the noun at the end of the phrase, the word affection is the noun, and intelligent and wise are the adjectives that precede that noun and qualify that noun. If I get a hold of affection, then I can do the upgrade of intelligent and wise very easily. But if I start out trying to build that affection by being intelligent and getting my wisdom going, I may never really get there. So that's my thought that relates to acceptance, insofar as that relates to acceptance of others, to integrate patience with love and understanding, to grow in understanding as we serve others in daily life. That would be my general response to these needs that have been expressed. So I now invite you to add your thoughts to my answers to the beautiful questions and project needs that have already been expressed here.
I'd like to take you up on that. I'd like to explain, I can be very brief, why I brought up procrastination. But before I do, I think to have intelligent and wise affection, you have to know people. You have to get to know them. And the best way to do that is by befriending them, helping them change a tire on a car, giving them a call to see how they're doing, just to talk to them, not with a question or a problem or anything else, just to show that you value them, and so forth and so on. And I think very importantly for our world is a willingness to forgive your enemies. I think that goes, the greatest decision in my life was made when I was about 20 years old. I forgave my father, who was a drunk, and I asked God to show mercy to all of his sins and errors. And as a recipient of that, I thought I had a certain authority to at least ask that. But by forgiving him, I was relieved of many anxieties as a person, as a man, as a husband, as a future father. But to befriend people is to get to know them. And then you are in turn befriended. And it works that way. At least it has in my life. I brought up procrastination because I'm writing a book about Jesus. I started based on the fourth part, well, based on the Urantia book generally, and the fourth part in particular. And I started in 2011. I've written about 325 pages, and my intuitive sense is to keep it under 400. It's written in the first person, and I explain in the preface that it's not inspired, though it's based on a book which is inspired, the Urantia book. And I'll explain more of that when I finish it. It's the most difficult writing I've ever done, the most challenging writing I've ever done, the most rewarding effort I've ever made, because I have to take into account my audience and thereby simplify the text intelligently without losing the substance therein. And I've gotten to the last month of his life. It's a tremendous problem because people of all kinds, the audience is any man or woman interested in Jesus. And I mean that just as I stated it. I serve no religious needs, although I take those into account. I don't serve any philosophy, but I take them into account. It's anyone interested in Jesus. And as I did with my teaching, in my teaching I did not procrastinate, or I very, very rarely ever did. I'm a high school teacher. I taught about 4,000 students, I estimated, for about 43 years in 3 states, and mostly public high school. I didn't have much of a problem with procrastination, partly because of what you said, Jeff, a supreme desire to act, mobilizing my abilities, my powers, working on maturity of mind, and the use of spiritual force. I used a lot of prayer. Most of my students never knew I was praying for them, and I prayed basically for character development. High school kids, adolescents from ages 14 to 18, need a great deal of prayer. Many are lost. Many are partially lost and bewildered and puzzled. But with this book, it's in the first person. That's been a bugaboo for me. Although I've written most of 85% of it, then I have to reread it, of course, when it's done, and then edit it as required, as needed. And when I finish that, I'd like to do 2 more books. I don't think I'll have I've been published in essays on eugenics and race based on the Urantia book, and guardian angels, influenced by the Urantia book, although I compared and contrasted guardian angels and the human religions from the standpoint of the Urantia book. That's how I work. But I won't do those until I finish this book on the master. And I think the challenge is to act. But that's symptomatic. The cause the cause is proportional. Causality is proportional to the quality of my relationship to my adjuster, which is essentially my mind as a human being, as a mortal, and the divine spirit, his spirit. The soul depends on that relationship. That's, I think, the basis for all religious and all true, real religious and spiritual life. And I think it's the basis for scientific truth and philosophical meaning. I agree with the substance of what you said about those. And I'll just add that I've had some success with dealing with procrastination, which again is a mark of the beast. That's how it's characterized in the book's words, not mine. What I found, I discovered some years ago, was can be summarized in a pronoun. Essentially, what we usually say, we humans say, is, how can I do this? Why has this happened to me? It's personal singular pronoun. We should change that, in my view, and I have, although that's still unfolding within me, to we, meaning the adjuster and myself and the adjuster. That's the we that I'm referring to. It's not a royal we, although the adjuster is royal. It's a loyal we. And that loyalty fosters identity with God through his spirit. So the question then becomes, how can we do this? So I've been approaching procrastination in terms of how can we do it? What can we do? I do that with all phases of my life. Thinking, feeling, doing, all phases of my life, thought, word, and action. And it's been helpful. The problem of growth is mine, not my divine friend within, who dwells within. And I think of him as my divine friend. I often refer to him that way. Deeply personal, of course. But this shift of pronoun from I to we, I think, is one way to express the key to maturing in the challenge to act. So the actions are ours, but the responsibilities, interestingly, are God's. I mean,
Charles,
the consequences are God's.
do you want to make a concluding statement?
Well, I'd like to read a relatively brief paragraph, which is my favorite statement in the book. It's on page 59, paper 4, section 4, paragraph 9. And my whole life, my whole destiny rests on this truth of this, the beauty and goodness of it. The consciousness of the victorious inspired divine counselor, the consciousness of the victorious human life on earth is born of that creature faith which dares to challenge each reoccurring episode of existence when confronted with the awful spectacle of human limitations by the unfailing declaration, even if I cannot do this, there lives in me one who can and will do it, a part of the Father Absolute of the universe of universes, and that is the victory which overcomes the world, even your faith. I depend wholeheartedly on that to continue this transfer from I to we. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Charles. That was a real treat. That was a real treat. Would others offer us something? Michael Hill is still with us. Pete, Aya, Ed. Can we hear from more of you? Yes, Michael.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for conducting this, and thank you, IUA, for providing a platform for this webinar. I've practiced Jeff's teachings before with patience. And what I'm working on now is acceptance, and listening to all the things that you've shared with us, Jeff, certainly does help me to I'm not quite sure how I want to say this. I guess I'm really taken by this supreme motive part, that I think what you have, of all the things that I've heard you say today, this idea of reaching in with that supreme desire, that it sort of trumps the struggles in my mortal mind in my efforts to deal, as Jesus did with the apostles, with my compatriots on the various boards and commissions and things that I am currently involved in. And so that's something that I want to thank you for, that I can take with me out back into the fields, which I have allowed myself this hour and a half to be with you, but no, I really, the crops are rotting on the vine almost as I speak. So I'm going to have to depart in this moment, but I want to thank you for that. And that's my little sharing back.
Thank you very much, Michael. I want to say, may I say one more thing to you, or do you really have to run now?
Well, they're not really rotting on the vine.
Well, let me just talk about acceptance a little bit. I was blessed very recently to be informed of a significant growth problem in mine that I had not been looking at. And it has to do with acceptance. And as I began to work on that, I realized that I abhor mediocrity. I am afraid of it in myself. My striving for excellence arises out of a repulsion for mediocrity. And I was shocked to realize that about myself, and to realize that I had that instinct with others as well. And so as I have begun to work on it, I have developed my friendship with the Eternal Mother Son, and, you know, being able to accept mediocrity in myself and pray for that acceptance. One of the fruits of the Spirit at the conference in Australia, the annual conference that Anzura puts on, I was able to attend last September, October, and we were each asked to pick a card of the fruit of the Spirit. Well, forgiving tolerance was the one that I picked, because I thought, well, I can sometimes be intolerant. And what I understand about tolerance is this. From the Latin, to tolerate means to put up with. There are burdens that you simply have to go through in this life. You can't change them, others can't change them, or maybe they can, but they don't, or they won't, or whatever. But there's stuff that we have to put up with. And so that's where tolerance comes in. Remember that Jesus' concept of group solidarity that he achieved in the 3 years of struggle with his parents about becoming an artist and integrating the duties of loyalty to his parents and as well to his own convictions of truth and righteousness. His concept was based on 4 virtues: loyalty, fairness, tolerance, and love. And tolerance is there, you know, and fairness means that you understand all the reasons why others have or you might have for some of these reactions that are difficult. The adjutants are very helpful here, because adjutant number 1 has to do with inherited instincts. Inherent instincts is the phrase in paper 36. But you know, we're told that we can't do much to change inherent reactions, but we can change our response to them. Well, where's the leverage for that? When we look in the adjutants, in the second adjutant, the adjutant of understanding, we've got the association of ideas, which enables us to achieve, you know, quick, prompt judgment, rapid reasoning, rapid judgment, prompt reasoning, but the judgment, the reasoning, and the action just flow. They're really fast, but these are not inherited instincts, and we can reprogram with the aid of that adjutant. We can reprogram. In paper 100, it talks about spiritual reflex, you know, responses, spiritual reflexes. So we can program the associations of ideas that we want, and that way we won't be easier said than done. But we know how to work constructively in this. And so as far as acceptance, you expressed a word of appreciation to me, and I, beloved Michael, wish to express my ineffable, undying gratitude for your acceptance of me.
You're my brother.
Yep, we've got some experience. I think I saw Ed starting to get ready to manifest. Ed, have you got something for us that you'd like to add?
Thanks, Jeff. Well, I had something a long time ago when you talked about projects, but I didn't really get it down. I'll just go over it shortly here, since time is at that point. My project was simply to consider the spirit influences that somehow, somewhere, aiding my ability to make decisions. Since my studies have got me to the position where I'm at the point in my life where I have a thought controller rather than a thought adjuster, hopefully, that these angel influences that work with us, that try to get things done, are aiding us as we ask for aid. This is my project in my life, my daily life. And I'm really, that's about it. I just wanted to add that little bit to your conversation today. Thank you, Jeff.
I love you, Ed, so much. And mute, please. Thank you. I want to say just this about thought controller. I don't have the resources at hand at the moment to say it, but in the next few days, I'm going to put out a blog and a podcast episode having to do with controller. We normally have an understanding of controller that is vastly inappropriate to the concept of controller in God. You know, sometimes someone might talk about massaging an idea, or you understand that thought, massaging an idea or massaging a project or something like that. That's closer to the idea of controller than this idea of precision instrumentation, the kind of control that, you know, we say this person is very controlling, and that's a pejorative term. We don't want to be controlling persons, if we think about it. So our idea of control is going to be updated, I think, for those who tune into that that podcast episode or blog post that should be coming up in a few days. Aya, would you like to add anything to our discussion today? We've got about 7 more minutes before we go into our concluding meditation and goodbye. So,
okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine, Aya.
Okay, you say if there are some kind of technical difficulties. So I welcome you. Well, I say you hello from the very, very hot summer Finland. We have really very, very hot summer. And my project is joy finding, but I started my summer vacation only in Wednesday. So I am in the very, very beginning of the project. And Jeff sent me this from the Urantia book that there in the paper 28, page 312.5, the secondary seconafim, the joy of existence. They write, among other things, that they endeavor to demonstrate that there is inherent joy in free will existence, independent of all extraneous influences. So I try to find this, and why Jeff gave me this joy finding project is because I have to work with my sadness. because I have had very many losses in my family, and that's why I'm doing this project. But I am in the very, very beginning. And I have been finding joy this week after that I I started my vacation. For example, yesterday I was in the 60 years of celebration of one Orthodox church, Orthodox Christian church in Finland, in Helsinki. It is the church of the holy prophet of Elijah. And there was very beautiful Orthodox singing and all those icons, and it was magnificent, magnificent celebration. And well, this is where I am now. Oh, thank you for showing Christ with the fire in his eyes. Yes.
This is an icon that Aya gave me that was painted by a friend of hers.
Yes.
And I thought you should see it.
Yes. I always enjoy so much icons, and now everybody of you saw it, because I'm an Orthodox Christian, and I. So what can I say? I have one poem, but this is from Yosemite when there was. Can I read this poem?
Yes.
But this is from Brandy Poppel. She was in Yosemite when we were 2013 there. I had then just lost my brother. And we seek to walk in beauty. To walk in beauty, this is one of the ways of joy finding, my project. And this was written by Brandy Poppel. She's a reader of the Urantia book. The sun, the moon, the stars, and the sky, vast ocean expanse, flocks of birds up on high, squirrels and gophers, dolphins at play, just another typical Santa Barbara day. Who could conjure up this magnificent plan? Certainly not mortal man. The seasons, the reasons for being alive, the journey, the adventure, the will to survive. Evolution, the solution to move us ahead. Progression towards perfection as we choose to be led. Into God's vision as we walk in the light. Behold the brilliant creation within our sight. All glory to God, creation divine. Let us live in the Lord, and may his light shine through us and to us, guide us this day. We want to walk in beauty, Lord. Please show us the way.
Beautiful.
Flor Robles has not shared anything with us yet. Flor, would you like to contribute just a little bit, a little brief something before we conclude? Please unmute.
Yes, Jeff. No, I am just listening carefully and trying to learn as much as I can from what you are saying today. Thank you so much. It's
Okay.
nice to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've got about, oh, Pete, do you want to say anything more? You said a little bit on chat.
Yeah.
We heard you. we heard you a little bit before we began.
Sure.
Do you want to say a little something here before we close?
Well, I have actually a question.
Please.
If I can. In terms about this growth and stuff, how do you measure all of this in terms of your progress, your relative state? I'm just curious. I hope that's related to what we're focused on here.
Pete, I love your question. I absolutely love it because, you know, people are wanting to figure out, well, in the psychic circles, what circle am I in? And you know, have I reached this? Have I reached that? And it seems to me that human beings are not able to discern that kind of thing with any precision, and it's probably for the best. We can be aware of growth, but knowing how far we are in those kinds of ways, I think is not given to us. Even the grandeur of genuine character achievement that, you know, in an age of light and life where the average human lifetime increases to hundreds of years, even 500 years, they never stop growing. There's no point of arrival that enables you not to continue to progress. And so I just feel that as we progress, there's an increasing soul satisfaction. But, you know, at the same time, and this will be my last comment, and then we'll go to the closing moment. I'm losing my thought. It may come here.
May I comment, Jeff, on his question? I'll try to be brief.
Well, if you can be very brief, because we've got 2 minutes and we've got 3 minutes of conclusion to do before, and we're recording now too, and so there's an issue. So please add what I could not, Charles.
Pete, one of the things we can do is look at the fruits of growth. You can see growth to a certain extent only in hindsight, but in hindsight you can observe its fruits. So if you wanted patience and you learn patience and you exhibit patience, that indicates you're growing. You have grown and you're growing. A crisis is a pretty accurate reflection of your character in any moment in time and space, in the present moment of time and space, for instance. And I think all of us, consciously or unconsciously, have done some of that. But you can become very conscious of it, not to keep observing the way a person, a navigator would on a ship, but to be mindful, not fearful, be mindful, though, of the fruits of the mind and spirit.
Charles, that's very wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And now let's just take a brief time for this worship that we have been anticipating and tending toward, whether we ascend all the way to it or just begin. But grateful worship of the Universal Father, whose indwelling presence is the guarantee that all our true growth projects will succeed through our sincere, persistent, and wholehearted cooperation in grace. Thank you, one and all. Thank you, one and all. Special thanks to Jeannie for all of her work relevant to this. To each of you for making the time, taking the time to be part of this, to contribute. Wish you well. Look forward to seeing you at a conference someday.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.
Adios, amigo.
Adios, amigo.
Thank you, Charlie.
Adios, Charlie.
Adios.
Hi, Janine, Jeff, everybody. Have a good
Thanks.
weekend.
Have a good weekend, you too. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Flor. Everyone.
Thank you to all. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Aya.